Now, John Cheever's story is much more traditional than Atwood's and perhaps even Paley's story. It has a definite beginning, a definite middle, and a definite end. Now, Atwood would say, the end is really when the main characters in this story, die, because ultimately that's what's going to happen. But it is the beginning here that draws us in and starts it in motion. Now, I said in a comment about this story when I, introduced it in Lessons in Writing, that it reminds me of a Simpsons episode, because at the beginning of the Simpsons TV series, there's always something going on after they get set down on the couch. There's always something going on, and you think, oh, well, this is what this episode is going to be about, and then at some point it changes, and it's about something totally different. They do that on purpose, and it is even to be expected. And I think this is what Cheever does in his story, because this story begins on an airplane, and it begins with Francis Weed, the protagonist, being in this plane that almost crashes. And this sets the tone for the rest of the story, even if you don't realize it at first, because it's almost like it's forgotten for the rest of the story. Cheever goes home, tells his family about it. They're not even concerned. Or did I say Cheever? Weed goes home, tells his family about it, and they're not even concerned. It's like to them it didn't happen. He undergoes a traumatic experience. Whether or not he really looks death in the face, he looks death in the face. And that becomes then the major pivot of the plot and the action of the plot. The conflict is indeed within Francis Weed himself, but also with other people and his lifestyle. He has conflicts with his children. He has conflicts with his wife. At one point they're ready to break up. And he has conflicts with the neighbors. And the conflict with himself is the attraction to the young woman. So Atwood would say, what is the why and what is the how of this plot? The why is his experience on the airplane. The how is then how he goes through. Actually, it is connected with the airplane as well, but how he proceeds through the rest of the story. Now, on page 75, Cheever writes, Francis had no powers that let him recreate a brush with death, particularly in the atmosphere of the commuting train, journeying through a sunny countryside where already in the slum gardens there were signs of harvest. So even Weed himself, after the experience in the plane, it becomes surrealistic. It becomes unrealistic. And the rest of the world continues on its way. He feels, I nearly died. And yet, the world continues on. It doesn't even acknowledge my importance or that I exist. I also want to point out, I ask you on the discussion board, is the historical context of this story important? And yes, it is. Now, at the very beginning of the story, on page 74, someone makes a comment, it's just like the Marne. And that was when Paris was invaded. Now, you could say it's just like Da Nang, it's just like, Baghdad. But this puts this in a certain historical context. And the reason why it is so important is because in the 50s, I'm not going to say that this idealistic image existed among the people of the 50s and the 60s, but certainly when we look back, we look upon that as an idealistic time, but it was also a time of great change. You had the communist scare going on with Eugene McCarthy and that. World War II had shaken people up. You had Korea, and that was also in the 50s, the late 50s and the early 60s, when the conflict in Vietnam started. There were social norms that were being kept in place, but they were already beginning to change, and that does have an effect on this story. You have other anomalies, even the dog Jupiter on page 77. The dog is an anomaly. There are many anomalies through this story, and Francis Weed becomes one. And probably the biggest one is when he gets this crush on this young girl, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. He even goes so far as to badmouth the young man that she, is attached to. Why does he do this? Relates back to the plane crash. The words midlife crisis are probably overused, but the plane, and it wasn't a plane crash, but the near crash, his brush with death precipitates his realization, I'm going to die. And he looks around at his idyllic life with his wife and his children, who don't even care that he nearly died. He looks around at the suburban lifestyle he's leading, and he becomes very dissatisfied with it. And then he gets this idealization of this young woman. And quite often, that is what we who enter middle age do. We turn around and we take stock of our life, and we say, what have we accomplished? What have we done? It is a stereotype that men go out and buy a red sports car, and it's a stereotype that I don't know what women do, and actually I do, but I'm not going to go into that because it's too close to home. So again, it all goes back to the beginning. This also has, some magical aspects. You get the feeling of magic on page 82, where it says, if Francis had believed in some hierarchy of love, the spirits armed with hunting bows and the capriciousness of Venus and Eros, or even in magical potions, philters, and stews, and scapulae and quarters of the moon, it might have explained his susceptibility and his feverish high spirits. So it does have some quality of perhaps longing for magic. Because you see, if Francis could say, this is why I have these feelings, it would be easily explained. Now, his dissatisfaction with his children are apparent. We see his dissatisfaction with his wife when they have the argument about, her leaving, which I think has been enacted before. But also with the old lady who is the matriarch of the neighborhood and the queen of the social hierarchy on page 81. She's talking about window curtains. And she says, now I'm praying to high heaven that the decorator will have them in the right length, because you know my house. You know my living room windows, and you can imagine what a problem they present. I don't know what to do with them. And Francis said, I know what to do with them. What? Paint them black on the inside and shut up. Whoa! I don't know if you realize what he has done. He has repudiated social hierarchy. He has totally and utterly dissed this woman who is control of this. And it greatly upsets his wife because it sets him outside the social norms of that time period. Why does he do it? It goes back to the beginning. He has seen death, and the length of curtains are absolutely and utterly unimportant. All the trifles of everyday life, unimportant. And, the story goes on, and basically that's what this is about, is just the dissatisfaction. And we go back to the magic later. He conquers his lust or his attraction for this young woman, or does he merely suppress it? But at the end of the story, it goes back to that search for the magical aspect. On page 90. In the cellar of his house, Francis Weed is building a coffee table. Dr. Herzog recommends woodwork as a therapy, and Francis finds some true consolation in the simple arithmetic involved and in the holy smell of new wood. Francis is happy. Now, the reason why this, and perhaps I shouldn't refer to it as magic, Francis has lost his religion. There's not a religion there that is buoying him up and supporting him. The smell of the wood is holy. This is becoming his new religion. And then at the very end of the story, "Here, pussy, here, poor pussy." But the cat gives her a skeptical look and stumbles away in its skirts. The last to come is Jupiter. He prances through the tomato vines, holding in his generous mouth the remains of an evening slipper. Then it is dark. It is a night where kings in golden suits ride elephants over the mountains. It is a longing for something mystical on the part of these people. Jupiter comes up with a slipper in his mouth. It is Cinderella's slipper. But is he looking for Cinderella? Or does this indicate that really there aren't any happy endings? Because the prince or the king does not have the slipper, so he can go out and find his true love, Cinderella. So, these are some of the things that this story is about. There's much, much more here, but those are some of the things that I garner from this story. And in your journals, I'm curious to see what you are going to garner, not garner.